Aisha woke to the soft glow of morning sunlight filtering through the thin curtains, the gentle warmth on her face mixing with the rhythmic flutter of her baby bump. She stretched slowly, careful of the gentle twinges in her back, a reminder of how far along she was in her pregnancy. At 6 months, every movement carried a heightened awareness of the life growing inside her. There was a quiet joy in her heart, a delicate excitement that mingled with the fatigue that had become a constant companion over the past months. Her home, a modest but cozy apartment, was quiet, almost eerily so, the kind of silence that both comforted and unsettled her. She noticed the faint traces of Horace's presence, a jacket draped over a chair, a coffee mug left on the counter, but something felt off. The morning routine unfolded mechanically. She walked to the kitchen to prepare tea, her hands cradling the baby bump almost instinctively. Her mind, however, wandered to the unanswered calls she had sent to Horace the night before. He had promised he'd call when he left work. Yet there was only silence. Her stomach knotted as she remembered the hushed conversations she had overheard, the muffled tones that abruptly ended whenever she entered the room. A small, uneasy feeling took root in her chest. Aisha tried to shake it off, reminding herself that mornings could be quiet and men busy, but the knot lingered stubbornly. As she sipped her tea, her eyes scanned the apartment, noting the little details she had never questioned before, the slightly ajar cupboard door, a faint creak in the floorboards. Her mind, a mix of maternal care and quiet anxiety, imagined 1,000 harmless explanations, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that something wasn't right. She paused, listening intently, her ears catching a soft, almost imperceptible sound at the door. Her pulse quickened, a mixture of anticipation and unease washing over her. In that moment, joy and fear entwined, the calm of the morning teetering on the edge of an unseen storm. Aisha remembered the early days of their marriage with a bittersweet smile. Back then, Horace had been attentive, charming, and full of laughter that could fill an entire room. They had spent long evenings sharing dreams, planning their future, and imagining the little family they were creating together. Every word from him felt sincere, every touch reassuring. The apartment, which now seemed quiet and tense, had once been alive with their shared happiness. But as the months had passed, subtle changes had begun to creep in, almost imperceptibly at first. Horace had grown distant, spending late nights at work or with friends, returning home with a hurried demeanor and an air of distraction. His laughter had become rarer, replaced by curt nods and distracted glances. The warmth that had once surrounded their marriage had thinned, leaving a cold distance that Aisha could neither ignore nor fully understand. She had tried, in her gentle way, to bridge the growing gap. Casual questions about his day had been met with dismissive responses or vague assurances that everything was fine. She had shared her excitement about the baby, hoping to spark the same joy in him, only to be met with a distracted smile or a change of subject. Her attempts at conversation, once effortless, now felt like threading a needle through a wall of silence. Each unanswered text, each unexplained absence, and every fleeting look of irritation had slowly piled up, layering unease over the joy she felt for their unborn child. Her sister, Sana, had noticed the change as well. During their occasional phone calls, Sana would gently probe, asking if everything was all right at home, her voice laced with concern. Friends had commented on Aisha's quiet demeanor, the way she flinched at unexpected noises or seemed preoccupied with thoughts she wouldn't share. These small observations, though well-meaning, only amplified Aisha's anxiety. She wanted to trust Horace, to believe that their love could weather these subtle storms, but the weight of unease pressed heavily on her heart. Even small incidents now seemed laden with meaning. Horace would suddenly change the topic when she brought up plans, his phone would buzz insistently with messages he quickly hid, and there were nights when he would come home smelling of unfamiliar cologne, brushing off her questions with vague explanations. Each occurrence, though minor in isolation, collectively whispered that something was amiss. Aisha's maternal intuition, sharpened by pregnancy, sensed a growing tension she could no longer ignore. Beneath the routine of their life, a storm was quietly building, and she could feel, with a sinking certainty, that the cracks in their marriage were widening toward a breaking point. Aisha stirred awake to an unusual stillness that hung over the apartment. The familiar morning hum, the distant traffic, the chirping birds, even the subtle creaks of the wooden floorboards, seemed muted, as if the house itself were holding its breath. She blinked against the sunlight spilling through the curtains, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over her like a heavy cloak. As she swung her legs over the side of the bed, she noticed it. Horace's cologne lingering in the living room, too sharp, too strong, and in places where he rarely stayed in the morning. A small knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. Her eyes drifted to the coffee table, where unopened messages glimmered on Horace's phone, a series of missed calls and cryptic texts that he had never shared. Next to it lay receipts for purchases she didn't recognize, expensive items that had no place in their shared plans. Each small detail fed her growing suspicion, and her maternal instincts heightened every sensation. She felt the protective surge of awareness that often comes with pregnancy, an almost instinctual need to safeguard her unborn child from the shadows she couldn't yet name. A faint creak at the door made her heart skip a beat. It was so subtle, easily dismissed, yet it sounded deliberate in the quiet apartment. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach, as if shielding the baby from the unseen threat. Anxiety coiled around her like a living thing, and fear prickled the edges of her mind, mingling with a sharp surge of maternal protectiveness. She paused, listening intently, straining to detect the slightest movement beyond the door. Every nerve seemed alert, every sense sharpened to an almost painful degree. In that suspended moment, the comfort of her home felt fragile, the safe bubble of her morning threatened by a tension she could no longer ignore. The air was thick with anticipation, and Aisha knew, deep down, that something unseen yet irrevocable was about to unfold. Aisha's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the door handle, her heartbeat pounding in her ears so loudly that it seemed to drown out the quiet of the apartment. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last, her legs moving as if through water, weighed down by anticipation and fear. The morning sunlight streamed through the window beside her, casting long, jagged shadows across the floor that seemed to twist and sway with the tension building inside her. The creak of the door as she nudged it open sounded impossibly loud, a harsh note in the otherwise silent room, echoing ominously down the hallway. She had prepared herself for mundane possibilities, a neighbor dropping by, a delivery person with a package, but nothing could have steeled her for the sight that met her eyes. There, framed in the doorway and illuminated by the soft morning light, was Horace. But he was not alone. Another woman, one whose presence seemed impossibly intimate and familiar to him, stood too close, her body pressed against his in a way that made Aisha's stomach twist painfully. The scene unfolded as though in slow motion, every movement seared into her mind. The way Horace's hand lingered, the woman's knowing smile, the whispered words that were carried faintly to her ears. Aisha froze, her body locked in disbelief. The air seemed to thicken around her, every breath sharp and shallow as shock rendered her immobile. Her mind raced, a torrent of thoughts colliding in chaotic confusion. How could this be real? How could the man she trusted, the father of her unborn child, betray her in such a way? Emotions collided violently inside her, anger flared hot and searing, betrayal cut deep, and heartbreak settled over her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't will away, her chest tightening with the pain of 1,000 unspoken questions. Time seemed suspended as she took in every detail, her senses acutely attuned to the betrayal before her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect herself and her unborn child, yet her body remained frozen, caught between the need to act and the paralysis of shock. In that moment, Aisha realized the irrevocable truth. Her life had changed forever, and the foundation of her marriage had crumbled in a single, heart-shattering instant. Aisha's hands shook as she stepped fully into the room, forcing herself to meet Horace's gaze. Her voice, though trembling, carried a firmness that startled even her. What is going on here?" she asked, each word measured, yet heavy with accusation. The room seemed to constrict around them, the air charged with a raw intensity that made every breath feel heavier. Her eyes darted between Horace and the other woman, trying to make sense of the scene that had shattered her world in an instant. Horace's reaction was immediate and chaotic. His confident facade crumbled as panic flashed across his face. "Aisha, I can explain," he stammered, his voice high-pitched, unnatural, desperate. He tried to reach for her, as if physical closeness could undo the betrayal, but she instinctively stepped back, creating a space that reinforced the boundaries now firmly drawn. His excuses tumbled out in a clumsy stream, each one more implausible than the last. Late-night work gatherings, misunderstandings, promises of nothing serious, but Aisha heard only the hollow ring of lies. The woman standing beside him reacted in a mix of fear and awkwardness. Her eyes widened, darting nervously between the couple as if unsure whether to flee or defend herself. There was no denying the audacity of her presence in Aisha's home, and yet she seemed momentarily paralyzed by the confrontation. The tension between the three of them was palpable, thick enough to feel like a physical weight pressing down on Aisha's chest. She could feel her pulse quickening, but she forced herself to breathe slowly, each inhale a conscious effort to remain composed for the sake of the life growing inside her. The noise of the confrontation did not go unnoticed. Neighbors, curious or concerned, began murmuring outside, their voices carrying faintly through the walls. The potential of public humiliation layered another level of intensity onto the moment, making every word and gesture feel magnified. Aisha's mind raced with a mixture of fury, heartbreak, and protective instinct. She realized she had to navigate this chaos carefully, not just for herself, but for the safety and well-being of her unborn child. Her confrontation, though emotionally charged, became a battlefield of control. Every lie Horace attempted to weave only deepened the wound, while every anxious glance from the other woman reinforced the betrayal. Aisha's shock transformed into a resolute clarity. This marriage could not survive what she had just witnessed. Despite the chaos surrounding her, she anchored herself in determination, knowing that the path forward required strength, courage, and an unwavering focus on protecting her future. Aisha stumbled backward, her legs trembling beneath her as she closed the door softly behind her, shutting out the unbearable scene she had just witnessed. The apartment, which had felt threatening moments ago, now seemed suffocatingly small, as though the walls themselves were pressing in. Her hands shook uncontrollably, and a wave of nausea swept over her, a visceral reminder that her body was not separate from the turmoil her heart endured. Each breath felt shallow, uneven, and labored, her chest tightening in rhythm with the storm of emotions raging inside her. The betrayal she had just uncovered was not only emotional. It hit her physically, shaking her core as she struggled to steady herself for the sake of her unborn child. Her mind raced, a chaotic tangle of disbelief, anger, and sorrow. How could Horace, the man she had trusted, the father of her child, have shattered their bond so completely? Each memory of their early happiness now cut like a blade, leaving her raw and exposed. She felt a surge of rage, a burning heat that demanded justice, yet beneath it lay a profound sadness, an aching sense of loss that weighed on her chest. Thoughts of their baby mingled with the fury and heartbreak, and she realized that her protective instincts surged even stronger now. She had to remain calm and composed, not just for herself, but for the life growing inside her. With trembling hands, Aisha reached for her phone. Her sister, Sana, would understand, she thought, her voice barely audible as she dialed. The familiar warmth and concern on the other end of the line brought a small measure of relief. She spoke in halting breaths, her words punctuated by tears, recounting the betrayal and the shock that still coursed through her body. Her best friend called shortly after, offering words of comfort, advice, and a steady presence that reminded her she was not alone. Meanwhile, Horace continued his frantic attempts at damage control, knocking on the door, calling her name, and promising explanations and apologies. But Aisha had already crossed a threshold. Trust, once shattered, could not easily be rebuilt. Each excuse he offered, each plea for forgiveness, only deepened the fissure between them. In that quiet, tension-filled apartment, Aisha understood with chilling clarity that the foundation of their marriage was irreparably broken, and no words could undo the betrayal she had just witnessed. Within hours, Aisha's family had arrived at the apartment, drawn by the urgency in her voice and the trembling words she had managed to convey over the phone. Her sister, Sana, and her parents entered swiftly, wrapping her in embraces that were at once protective and grounding. The room, once thick with the tension of betrayal, now buzzed with the combined energy of concern, outrage, and unwavering support. Her mother held her hand tightly, whispering calming words, while her father's stern gaze swept over Horace as he entered, a silent warning of the consequences that awaited. Horace attempted to explain himself, but the room erupted in confrontation almost immediately. Accusations flew, sharp and unyielding, as Aisha recounted every detail of the morning's discovery. He tried to defend his actions, his voice rising in panic, stumbling over denials and half-hearted justifications. The family's reaction was swift and unrelenting. They questioned his honesty, his morality, and the very character he had claimed to uphold. Every excuse he offered was met with incredulity, their protective instincts for Aisha and her unborn child overriding any desire to entertain his explanations. The discussion escalated into a heated exchange, voices echoing off the walls, as Horace attempted to regain control of a situation that had long slipped from his grasp. Yet, for every defensive statement he made, Aisha's family countered with firm, unwavering logic and moral clarity. Their focus was unshakable, safeguarding Aisha, ensuring her safety, and protecting the baby from emotional and physical harm. By the end of the confrontation, it was clear that Horace faced immediate consequences. His credibility had crumbled under the weight of undeniable evidence and the unified disapproval of those who truly mattered. Questions about his reliability, integrity, and suitability as a partner now hung in the air like a judgment he could not evade. In the face of betrayal, Aisha's family became her fortress, offering guidance, protection, and the reassurance that she was not alone in navigating the painful aftermath of her husband's actions. Aisha sank onto the edge of the sofa, her hands pressed against her face as waves of grief rolled over her, relentless and unyielding. Sadness clawed at her chest, deep and suffocating, each heartbeat echoing with the memory of trust broken. Anger surged through her in sudden, fiery bursts, making her want to scream, to lash out at the man who had betrayed her so completely. Confusion followed in unpredictable waves, leaving her mind scattered and frayed, as though the very ground beneath her had crumbled and she were struggling to find her footing. Pregnancy hormones intensified every feeling, turning each pang of sorrow sharper, each flash of fury hotter, and each tremor of fear deeper. The emotional storm inside her felt almost physical, a tide she could not escape. Memories of happier times pierced through the turmoil, slicing into her consciousness with cruel precision. She recalled the mornings when Horace had made her coffee just the way she liked it, his laughter filling the rooms, the whispered promises of forever that had once seemed unshakable. Those recollections clashed violently with the betrayal she had witnessed, each joyful image now tinged with the bitter realization that it had been a facade, a mirage that concealed a harsh and painful truth. As the storm raged within her, Aisha's thoughts turned inward, probing questions arising with unrelenting intensity. Had she been naive? Had she ignored warning signs, brushed off instincts that now screamed in retrospect? She questioned the decisions that had brought her here, the marriage she had invested so much of herself in, and the personal values she held dear. Each reflection was painful but necessary, sharpening her clarity even amid the chaos. Slowly, determination began to emerge from the haze. The vulnerability she felt transformed into resolve, a recognition that protecting herself and her unborn child had to become her foremost priority. She realized that the life growing inside her depended on her strength, her ability to make decisions unclouded by fear or sentimentality. The storm did not abate instantly, but within its turbulence, Aisha discovered an inner fortitude, a certainty that she would navigate the betrayal and emerge resilient, placing safety and self-preservation above all else. Aisha knew that emotional resilience alone would not be enough to navigate the upheaval her life had just undergone. Determined to protect herself and her unborn child, she reached out to a trusted lawyer, scheduling a consultation to understand her rights and the legal avenues available. The discussion was methodical and pragmatic, covering divorce proceedings, custody considerations, and the specifics of child support. Each word offered Aisha a sense of structure amid the chaos, a roadmap for reclaiming control over a situation that had spiraled out of her hands. She listened intently, taking notes and asking pointed questions, her mind sharp despite the lingering emotional turmoil. Simultaneously, she began taking practical steps to safeguard her financial and physical security. She updated her bank account passwords, ensuring that her finances were protected, and reviewed household documents to determine what was rightfully hers. Personal belongings, from family heirlooms to everyday items that carried sentimental value, were carefully organized and accounted for. The apartment, once a shared space, was now being subtly transformed into a safe zone, a sanctuary where she and her child could feel secure. Aisha also started planning the separation, weighing the options between temporary arrangements and a permanent move. Every decision was guided by the goal of minimizing risk and ensuring stability for herself and the baby. She consulted family and friends discreetly, balancing their input with her own instincts, carefully plotting each step with precision. Through these legal and practical measures, Aisha discovered a deep sense of empowerment. Despite the emotional storm she had weathered, she felt herself reclaiming authority over her life. Each action she took, each boundary she established, reinforced her autonomy. In confronting the betrayal with clarity and strategic thinking, Aisha realized that she was no longer a passive participant in her circumstances. She was taking decisive control, building a foundation for a future defined by safety, dignity, and resilience. Horace appeared at the apartment later that evening, his expression a mixture of desperation and shame. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and trembling, attempting to carry the weight of sincerity. "Aisha, please. I never meant for it to happen like this. It was a mistake, a momentary lapse. I love you, and I want to make things right," he pleaded, eyes searching hers for a sign of forgiveness. He spoke rapidly, offering excuses for his behavior, trying to frame it as a misunderstanding, a lapse in judgment, something that could be explained away if only she would listen. Aisha listened, her body tense, her mind acutely aware of every nuance in his tone and every flicker of emotion in his eyes. Part of her longed to believe him, to cling to the hope of reconciliation for the sake of the baby and the remnants of the life they had once shared. Yet another part, stronger and surer, recognized the manipulation veiled beneath his words. She saw past the apologies, past the carefully chosen phrases meant to soften the blow of his betrayal. Her instincts, sharpened by shock, intuition, and the unyielding need to protect her unborn child, warned her that trust once shattered could not be repaired so easily. Conflicting emotions warred within her, love, fear, hope, and anger, but slowly, clarity emerged. Aisha realized that no plea, no apology, and no explanation could undo what had been done. She could not allow herself to be swayed by charm or regret when the foundation of her marriage had been irreparably broken. With a calmness that surprised even herself, she spoke firmly, asserting boundaries that were absolute. She would protect herself and her child above all else, refusing to be drawn back into a web of lies. In that moment of confrontation and inner turmoil, Aisha discovered her own strength, her self-worth, and the power of independence. The emotional climax of the evening crystallized a truth she had been fighting to accept. Her life, and the life of her child, would no longer be dictated by someone who had betrayed her so profoundly. She was no longer a victim, she was the author of her own future. Aisha sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, but her mind was anything but calm. Over the past days, she had weighed every possibility, revisited every memory, and listened to every plea and excuse from Horace. Each reflection only strengthened her resolve. This marriage, fractured beyond repair, could no longer provide the stability, trust, or safety she and her unborn child deserved. The decision, though heart-wrenching, had crystallized within her. She would proceed with the divorce, firmly and without hesitation. When she confronted Horace with her decision, the room became charged with a tense, almost palpable energy. His initial reaction was a mix of disbelief and fury, his voice rising as he tried to argue, to negotiate, to plead. Denial flickered across his features, quickly giving way to regret as he realized the irrevocable nature of her choice. He attempted to twist words, promising changes and reform, but Aisha's clarity was unshakable. Each word he spoke only affirmed her decision, highlighting the impossibility of rebuilding trust where betrayal had struck so deeply. With deliberate intention, Aisha began to enact symbolic steps that underscored her autonomy. She changed the locks on the doors, a definitive act of reclaiming control over her space and her life. She packed essential belongings, carefully selecting the items that represented her independence and her bond with her unborn child. Every movement, every careful decision, reinforced the message that she was stepping fully into a new chapter, one defined by self-reliance and foresight. By the end of the day, a tangible sense of resolution settled over her. The immediate tension, once suffocating and chaotic, began to dissipate. In its place emerged empowerment and clarity. Aisha embraced the freedom she had carved out, recognizing that while the marriage had ended in heartbreak and betrayal, her life, and the life growing inside her, remained hers to protect, nurture, and shape. The future, once uncertain and clouded, now held the promise of safety, dignity, and self-determined strength. Aisha slowly began the process of rebuilding her life, determined to create a safe and nurturing environment for both herself and her unborn child. The apartment, once heavy with tension and betrayal, was gradually transformed into a space of calm and warmth. Soft blankets were arranged carefully, pastel-colored curtains swayed gently in the breeze, and small touches, a few potted plants, framed photographs of cherished memories, brought a sense of comfort and reassurance. Every decision, every detail, was made with her baby in mind, a conscious effort to cultivate security and love amidst the shadows of recent trauma. To support her emotional healing, Aisha sought therapy, finding solace in a trained professional who could guide her through the complex layers of grief, anger, and disappointment. She leaned on friends and family, whose steady presence offered both encouragement and grounding. Conversations filled with empathy and understanding allowed her to process the betrayal, while gentle reminders of her worth reinforced her confidence. Personal growth became a central focus, as she reflected on her experiences, acknowledged her resilience, and set intentions for the life she wanted to create. New routines took shape, centered around preparing for motherhood independently. She meticulously organized her finances, ensuring stability for the months ahead, and embraced self-care practices that nurtured her body and mind. Daily walks, nutritious meals, and moments of quiet reflection became anchors in her life, helping her maintain balance and perspective. She also prepared for the practical aspects of parenting, researching tips for newborn care, arranging doctor's appointments, and assembling essentials for the baby's arrival. Amidst this focus on stability, opportunities for growth and fulfillment began to emerge. Aisha revisited hobbies she had neglected, considered career prospects that excited her, and rekindled friendships that had once been put aside. Each new venture offered a sense of purpose and possibility, small sparks of joy and empowerment that gradually replaced the lingering shadows of betrayal. Through these steps, Aisha discovered a profound truth: strength, resilience, and hope could flourish even after the deepest hurt. While the past could not be undone, the future remained hers to shape. Every deliberate action, every nurturing choice, reinforced her independence and optimism, illuminating a fresh start filled with promise, love, and unwavering courage for herself and her child. Aisha sat quietly in the soft morning light, her hands resting gently on her baby bump. The months of turmoil and heartbreak had left their mark, yet they had also carved out a deeper awareness within her. She reflected on the betrayal she had endured, examining the choices, warning signs, and instincts she had sometimes ignored. The pain was undeniable, but so was the strength she had discovered in herself, the ability to confront truth, to make difficult decisions, and to protect both her heart and her unborn child. Each lesson she had learned was a stepping stone toward empowerment, a reminder that self-awareness and courage could coexist even in the aftermath of devastation. She recognized, more than ever, the importance of boundaries, intuition, and personal safety. These were no longer abstract concepts but guiding principles that shaped her daily life. Her instincts, which had whispered warnings long before the betrayal became apparent, now served as a compass, directing her toward choices that prioritized her well-being and the future of her child. Boundaries were no longer negotiable, they were her shield and her declaration of self-respect. Looking down at her rounded belly, Aisha felt a sense of hope blossoming within her. She envisioned a future filled with joy, independence, and a life built on her own terms. The faint movements of her baby reminded her that love, resilience, and new beginnings could emerge even from the darkest moments. Though the betrayal had ended her marriage, it had not destroyed her spirit. Instead, it had ignited a determination to live authentically, to embrace her strength, and to nurture a future defined by self-respect and care. She whispered a quiet promise to herself and her child: their life together would be one of hope, love, and unwavering courage. And as she rose, shoulders squared and heart steady, Aisha carried with her a truth that would guide her always. She was whole, she was powerful, and her story was only just beginning.